Donald Trump went and tweeted about the plight of the white farmer in South Africa because of a story that came out recently, where the government has officially begun the process of seizing farms from white landowners. The issue is about racial equality, and that's how they're framing it in South Africa, that the whites are an overwhelming minority of the country, less than 9%, I believe, yet they own 72-ish% of the land. So the government wants to redistribute the land, and there have been activists who have said that they need to seize the means of production and things to that effect. Laure Southern did a documentary on it. But the question that everyone keeps talking about, and it seems to dominate the conversation when it's not what the president was talking about or what many conservatives are talking about, is the question of white genocide. Is there a white genocide happening in South Africa? The answer is no. And that's not, don't take my word for it. Laure Southern did a documentary called Farmlands, where she said everything she covered does not equal genocide. But, and here's the but, if they continue down this path, it is possible. So, sure. And I think a lot of people who are, using the term white genocide are using it in a light sense where they feel like there's build-up to a potential race war or something to that effect. But listen, if Laure Southern is going to say that what's going on in South Africa does not yet mean that there's a genocide happening, then I don't see how the right is going to argue against it. She probably did one of the most comprehensive documentaries on that subject matter. Whether you like her politics or not, she covered it pretty in-depth and she interviewed both sides. So Donald Trump tweeted this. He said, "I've asked Secretary of State, Secretary Pompeo, to closely study the South African land and farm seizures and expropriations, the large-scale killings of farmers. South African government is now seizing land from white farmers." And he tagged Tucker Carlson and Fox News. And when you go on Twitter, you're going to see a ton of people associated with the left and certain news outlets claiming it's not happening. But there's a couple things going on here. For one, they're claiming the argument is entirely about white genocide, which it's not. That is a more extreme way to frame what's going on. Are there farm attacks? Yes. Are they predominantly attacks on white people? Yes. But farmlands are also predominantly owned by white people. So it's possible that it's really just about, look, you've got people living in the middle of nowhere and crime is really, really bad in South Africa. Now, let's take a look at some of the articles. Namely, first, we have Vox. Trump's tweet echoing white nationalist propaganda about South African farmers explained. There's no evidence of a genocidal campaign against white farmers. Okay. This issue is so ridiculous. I tweeted about this. I said that I think this might be the issue that shows, it's proof, that the left and the divide between the left and the right in this country cannot be mended. Because even bringing up the issue that's happening in South Africa, which doesn't have to be racial, but it doesn't have to be about like a white genocide. It's literally kind of like a socialist push to seize land in the name of equality. You can't talk about it because Vox is going to say you're echoing white nationalists. Okay, sure. Do white nationalists talk about the issue of South Africa? Of course they do. Does that mean no one can talk about it? No, of course not. There are serious problems in South Africa, and of course we can talk about it. Let's take a look at this article. They say there's no evidence of a genocidal campaign against white farmers. That is an opinion. That is not fact. They're calling this an explainer. However, they've already injected a couple, opinions, to say the least. Did they need to say that Trump was echoing white nationalists? No, they could have said Trump's tweet about South African farmers. Let's start by saying right here, this sentence, totally pointless. There's no evidence of a genocidal campaign against white farmers. Also, an opinion. And this is what we're seeing from left-wing media. Let's take a look at what we actually got here. So this is a story from the Huffington Post. Malema. We have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. This is a Huffington Post, I believe, the South African story. Julius Malema says he has not called for the murder of white people, quote, at least for now, which is to say that they may at some point. And there have been statements made by activists associated with the ANC, the ruling party, that if they don't start expropriating lands from white people, there will be bloodshed. And that what they're doing now is an attempt to actually do it without bloodshed, to be calm and reasoned about it. So he said, I'm saying to you, we've not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future. Asked by the presenter if he understood that to some this might sound like a genocidal call, Malema responded, crybabies, crybabies. I can't give you a guarantee of the future, he repeated, especially when things are going the way they are. If things are going the way they are, there will be a revolution in this country. I can tell you now, there will be an unled revolution in this country, and an unled revolution is the highest form of anarchy. This leads many people to play up the white genocide idea that they are facing this issue. And there's a group called the Sidelanders. This is all covered in Laure Southern's documentary. And the Sidelanders are preparing for a potential race war. So now, some people might say that there is, white genocide. I talked about this on my other channel a little bit, and I said I was wrong. So I want to show you a quick clip from Laure Southern's documentary, and I can give you her take on it as someone who is more sympathetic to the cause and actually spent time in South Africa.
Does this amount to genocide? Not yet, but according to organizations like Genocide Watch, and taking into account everything I have seen and heard on the ground, South Africa is stepping closer to that reality every single day.
So there's Lauren's take, that what's going on is not yet white genocide or anything like that. And I think that's actually fair of her to say, because obviously a lot of people who are associated with alt-light or even white identitarianism are going to say it is. And Laure Southern, who is considered alt-light, saying that not yet, right, we're not there yet, is fair of her, I would argue. But let's take a look at this tweet. So this is one of the top tweets in reference to South Africa. Abby D. Phillip is a CNN White House correspondent. She said, "Of the tweets Trump sent last night, this one was perhaps the more revealing. A straight-from-TV defense of white farmers in South Africa over non-existent large-scale killings, a favorite talking point of white nationalists." And this, I take so much issue with this. Can we not talk about the problems of South Africa without being called white nationalists? Is it, are they going to say I'm a white nationalist simply because I'm bringing up that these things happen? And they do. So let's take a look at this Wikipedia entry. South African farm attacks. In attacks on South African farms, predominantly white farmers and black farm workers. And they show us some numbers. In November 2017, analysis of the BBC found that there is sufficient data to estimate a murder rate for South African farmers. Between 1994 and March 2012, there had been 361,000 murders in all of South Africa. And between 1990 and March 2012, there had been an estimated 1,544 murders on South African farms, of which 208 of the victims were black. The data for farm attacks is self-reported to a commercial farmers organization, Transvaal Agricultural Union. Possible motives. The South African government believes the chief motive for the attacks is robbery. This position is shared by Afrikaner rights group AfriForum, which does not believe there is racial motive associated with most attacks. And this is what bothers me so much about the story, because the left identitarians are acting like nothing is happening, in some instances actually supporting land expropriation, and the right identitarians, typically white identitarians, are acting like it is white genocide, when in reality, the attacks are happening. Most of the people attacked are white. It could just be because most landowners are white. It seems like the motivation is not racial. It is actually about just robbing people. And there's also an issue that if the government is talking about racial equality and the need to take land from white farmers, which they are doing, and then white farmers are killed, I think this is where you're going to see people concerned about the potential for race war or genocide. This is actually happening. And it's strange to see Vox say that there's no evidence to suggest this. Well, of course there is, but that's your opinion, and that's my opinion. But when someone, a politician, says they're not calling for the death, for the killing of white people yet, yeah, I think that is evidence, and that's fair to say. It'd be absurd not to. But I also want to point out, Newsweek reported on this. South African white farmers' land to be seized in controversial land redistribution claim. And Newsweek is very left-leaning, in many instances, far left. So if even Newsweek is going to report this, then I'm sorry to the people who are left-wing identitarians. You're incorrect. This is happening. They are taking farms from white people, and they're trying to do it without compensation. So we have a huge problem. Now, I tweeted a joke earlier, and a bunch of Trump supporters got mad because Trump is famous for his America First rhetoric, which is a typical talking point among people associated with the Republican Party or the right. The point I'm trying to make is that there are many issues all over the world that we could be focusing on. Conservatives are very concerned about what's going on in South Africa for several reasons. For one, you have white identitarians, I'm differentiating them from conservative, who are concerned about white genocide, but you also have conservatives who are concerned about racism and when a government would seize land from people based on the color of their skin. We saw what happened in Zimbabwe. When they enacted land reforms, it disrupted the economy, people were starving, it was actually really bad. And then recently, they brought many of the white farmers back, and there were videos of people cheering. If we can't agree that there is a problem in South Africa that needs to be dealt with, we're in trouble. Many people on the right are pointing out it's a human rights issue, and it's dangerous. It's going to result in a collapse of the South African economy like we saw in Zimbabwe. Some people argue it's a different circumstance and it won't happen that way. Personally, I think the government seizing land without compensation can only lead to bad results. If we take a look at what happened in China during the Great Leap Forward in the Cultural Revolution, when they started instructing uneducated farmers to make steel, didn't work out so well. And seizing land from farmers to give to people who aren't educated isn't going to work out because people who don't know how to work a farm aren't going to be able to. There are problems. There's a terrible history of South Africa. They had a minority government. It didn't work, and that's their words, not mine, and it ended. But now we're seeing the problem of the majority oppressing a minority. And no, I'm not talking about white genocide, but having the government come and take your land away because you are a different color is not right. And it's also important to realize that some of these farms aren't long-standing inheritances. Some people actually bought the farms. And what, are we going to look back in history to see who they bought them from? How did they come to own the land in the first place? And then if someone bought a farm, taking that farm away from them simply because they bought it from somebody else, because somebody else got it from somebody else in the past, it's all a very confusing and complicated issue that won't stop. It will never stop. And this is the problem, in my opinion, with identitarianism. Now, people who are white identitarians like the cause because they say, look, white people are under attack. And the left identitarians like the cause because they're saying, haha, look who's fighting back. In my opinion, you're just going to target someone based on their race and not actually deal with the underlying issues of education and poverty. And that, to me, is the biggest problem. But let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll keep the conversation going. Obviously, I can't go through every single aspect about what's going on in South Africa, not in a short video like this. You'd have to do an hour-and-a-half long documentary, perhaps something like Laure Southern made. As for her documentary, what I will say is that I find it to be hyper-partisan, but I don't think she's lying or wrong. I just think that after you watch her documentary, you do need to read and watch more. Because even to her detriment, she can do the best job in the world trying to cover what she thinks is important, but she can't cover everything. So ultimately, I think the Farmlands documentary she did a good job. I mean, look, like I said, at the end, she says it's not white genocide. You know, it doesn't amount to that. And there are issues involved, and personally, I disagree with a lot of Lauren's politics, and that's fine. I think you should take a look at her documentary, but you should also take a look at other sources and try and find the truth that may be closer to the middle. Personally, if you've got one side claiming there's a white genocide and one side claiming it's a lie, and Lauren's saying, no, there's no white genocide, but we should look at it, I think she's being pretty fair about it. But it doesn't mean she's got the entire story. So, you know, that's all I can say. I don't want to act like you're going to learn the history of South Africa from her documentary, but I don't want to say don't watch it because I think she did a pretty good job. But comment below and let me know what you think about the issue of South Africa, and we will keep the conversation going. You can follow me on Twitter at Timcast, new videos every day on this channel at 4 p.m., and I'll have new videos up on my second channel, Timcast News, at 6 p.m. So thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.